Okay, so Walt, thanks very much for giving us the interview. So, as I said, would you first of all start off, just tell us about your family, your dad, your mum, where they came from and all that?
My dad was Mickey Croke, Waterford born, lived down in Jenkins Lane, in the old heart of the city there. Worked in the jute factory nearly all of his life, all of his working life. By all accounts, he was a very good soccer player on the local scene. Played with Tyker most of his life. Jute factory, in the factory leagues, they had a club called Tyker FC up in Tyker grounds up at the top of Griffiths Place, actually across the road from where my mother lives. And he played with them all his life. Worked in the jute factory until it closed. My mother was pretty well known around the town. Annie Croke, Annie O'Loughlin was her maiden name. She came from May Lane off the Yellow Road. Her family moved when she was 7, I think, up to Ardnagrania, which was very close to where my father lived in Tyker Avenue, and the jute factory. She worked in the jute factory. They met in the jute factory. And the rest is history, as they say. There was 9 of us, 9 children came about as a result.
I remember seeing pictures of the jute factory used to have like excursions, and they used to have like the annual dances and all that kind of stuff. So
That's
there was
right.
kind of a social side to it. Well,
Oh, there was, yeah. Very much so.
and a big load of women worked there.
I'd say the women possibly outnumbered the men for a long period of time there, yeah.
Do you remember the jute factory?
Oh, I do, very well, yeah.
What do you remember?
Well, I can remember both my parents working there. They worked on opposite shifts. One went in at 8 o'clock, finished at 3 o'clock, and the other started at 3 and worked until 10. 12 maybe, 12 o'clock on 2 nights a week they worked until. I could never forget the jute factory in the sense that they had a hooter that went off at 10 to 8 every morning, and at 10 to 3, 10 minutes before everyone was due to start work, to ensure that people got there on time. As I said, they had a soccer pitch which was Tyker. The Tyker pitch which was some of the best facilities that were in the town at the time. So we all played over there, played hurling, played soccer. Welch Park was on the other corner, so it was fairly, we had a lot of things to do up that way.
And physically in the factory there, in the jute factory, it was very noisy, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. A lot of people that worked there ended up with problems with their hearing. Both my parents did.
So they weaved the hessian, the jute.
Yes, they done the full. They done. They started off with the raw materials there and finished up with the like you said, the hessian for to make the bags and whatever. Yeah. And
the backs of carpets, was all that.
Yeah, there was. It was. I couldn't say. I don't know exactly all of what they made and what it was used for, but
It was very dusty.
It was very dusty there. One of the benefits of it was that they made sacks for Miloko, the chocolate factory up in Carrick-on-Suir, and the lorries just come down from there with to collect their sacks and what have you, and sometimes they'd have bags of chocolate on the back, chocolate crumb it was called at the time, and if somehow some of the bags got broken open, you could get your hand in, you could get your chocolate when you couldn't afford to get it in any of the shops up there, It was fairly expensive at the time, but chocolate crumb was the thing I can always remember from my childhood. And I know it was never made in the jute factory, but that connection was always there, that those type of lorries came along to collect what they had to collect, but when they came along they had a couple of stray bags of chocolate crumb on the back, and sometimes they were broken.
The children of Waterford did well out there.
They certainly did. They done even down on the quays when they. I remember down in some of the warehouses on the quays. It was fairly productive to be down around there at certain times of the day or the week. But yeah.
That's gas. And then you were. You said there was 9 of you.
Yeah.
And where did you come in the family?
I was the oldest.
Oh right.
Mm.
So. Being the oldest, then, was there kind of pressure for you to get a job and all that kind of stuff? Or
I won't say pressure as such, but I worked as a messenger boy on a messenger boy's bicycle for Henry Malloy down in Patrick Street. Well, I was based in Patrick Street, but I worked out of all of the Malloy's butcher shops. There was quite a number of them in the town at the time. That was when I was in primary school.
Wow. Where did you go in primary?
I started in the presentation above until I was 7 years of age. I made my communion up there, then moved down to, you had a choice, either move to Mount Sion or De La Salle. Big choice. I moved to Mount Sion and stayed there. I was in Mount Sion until I was 13 and I went to the CTI then.
And why did you go to Mount Sion, not De La Salle?
I think most of the children that left, most of the boys that left the presentation at that time went to Mount Sion. Now, there could have been a couple of them that did go to De La Salle. I think I'd say that there definitely was. I know a couple of lads that did go to De La Salle, but it was the handiest, it was the nearest, and you were going to be walking down to school every day, so it all came into effect. You took all that into account.
And then you were a messenger boy, and what did that involve?
Delivering meat, basically, from the butcher shop to houses. People called in and ordered their meat in Malloy's, and if the shop was busy, they'd take your order, and later on in the day they'd get it together. I would have went down there after school and filled up my little basket on the front of the bike and travelled around the town.
And so you'd have to know your way around town now, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, you'd find your way around. There was lots of other people on messenger boys' bikes going around, and even if you left the shop saying that you knew where you were going and you really didn't, you'd meet up with some of the lads on the bikes and say, "Geez, any chance to give me a hand with this?" And they'd explain exactly where you had to go, with the meat.
And would you get a tip off anyone with you?
Yeah, you would. On occasions.
Okay.
On occasions. It wouldn't happen all the time, but yeah, some people would.
And so you did that then from, we say, 2:30 until whatever?
Yeah, until the shop closed. Yeah. Went down. I didn't go down every day after school, but I went down near the weekend. I think it was Thursday, Friday, and I went in on all day Saturday.
Oh, was that Henry Malloy?
That was Henry I worked with then, yeah, out of Henry's shop. There was a number of other lads worked in the other shops, but depending on how busy it was, you could end up going up there to make a delivery out of some of the other shops.
And the town centre was very busy in those days, wasn't it? A lot of people lived down there.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Everybody. I think every shop in town or every public house in town, either the family that ran the shop lived over it. I mean, if you walk downtown now, it's a shame to see that there's no one living over any of the shops or the pubs or anything like that, It was very busy, yeah. It was a busy little spot.
And then in Mount Sion, did you like school?
I did. I liked the fact going to Mount Sion. I liked playing hurling and what have you. I wasn't very good at the actual subjects themselves, but I enjoyed the hurling and I enjoyed the camaraderie that was there. Some great friends were made there, And I remember more about playing in the yard and that than what I'd done in the classroom. So.
And was it tough in those days in Mount Sion?
It was very tough. Yeah, there were some hairy moments. Witnessed some strange things down there and that, But
and then you went from there to Tech, you said?
I went to CTI and done a group cert there.
At what age did you leave then? Was it 12 or 13 or
to
go to the Tech?
I done the primary cert examination in Mount Sion, and once that was done, you either went into the secondary or you left Mount Sion and went elsewhere. I left and I went down to the CTI and went as far as doing the group cert, and I got an apprenticeship out in Morris's on the Manor, where Closegate is now. Morris's had their wood company there, and I got an apprenticeship as a wood machinist with a man called Joe Murphy. He lived up around the corner here. He lived in Cartridge's Avenue, sorry. He was the wood machinist down there, yeah. So I was serving my time with him.
Okay.
I think I was on £2 a week down there. And a number of my friends had started in the glass factory, and they were getting, I think it was 17 and 6 more than I was getting. £2 17 and 6. So the 17 and 6 was the attraction, and I went out and put my name in down the glass factory.
And on that subject then, was there people, a lot of companies in Waterford, did they resent the fact that the glass factory was paying more than anyone else?
I'd say they could have. At that age, you weren't paying much attention to that end of things. But I know that a lot of people left jobs elsewhere for to go to the glass factory. You know, there was that extra few pounds there at the time, shillings they were at the time, not pounds. But
and then to go from Morris's, I mean, Morris's must be a very interesting place as well.
It was.
Like big machines and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And the skill, it's unbelievable the skill that man had, the wood machinist Joe Murphy above, and the sawyers that were there, Batty Brennan, and there was a number of other people there. They had apprentice sawyers, apprentice wood machinists. I think I was the only wood machinist apprentice there at the time.
What's the difference between a wood machinist and a sawyer?
Well, the sawyer just would prepare the work for the wood machinist, and the wood machinist set up his machine. He had to tool it up with he would produce banisters for stairs and architrave. All your surrounds of your doors were all made through the machine. Oh, wow. You know, he had to set it up. It was very, very intricate what he had to do. It was very interesting. I was interested in it until. And
was it, again, I mean, you didn't have any earplugs in those days, was it?
No. The really health and safety wasn't a major point. You would get the earplugs when the machine was up and running. I'd be at the back Joe would be feeding the timbers into the machine, and I'd be taking them off at the back and stacking them. He would show you then he'd call you down when he was setting up the tools for whatever type of material, whatever type of timbers that he was preparing. There's a lot of measurements in it, as you can well imagine, because all these tools had to all fit together to get your final piece. But once he got that machine set up, boy, it worked then. It was going for a while. You had to keep stopping every now and again and checking the measurements and make sure everything was uniform, you know. Mm. And so it wasn't bad in that sense that the machine. It wasn't a continuous flow. It had to be stopped and checked every now and again. You couldn't just assume that everything was going to be right, you know. But it was very, very interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny, you know, how all these old industries were very normal in Waterford. Like,
yes, yeah.
There was a big, making church pews and all that was really normal.
Yes, yeah. Well, he would have produced the timbers for it, and you know, it would have been brought to wherever they were going to produce. Yeah. Hearns possibly, or they were a big company at the time. Yeah. Yeah, there was quite a number of people employed down there, you know, in the yard. It was very similar to, I suppose, Graves's was the other one that was in town at the time, you know. But it was interesting. Lots of sawdust produced, and people coming in buying bags of sawdust to make up burners. They used to have burners in certain places. They used to pack barrels of sawdust and put a broom handle down in them. And they'd have holes in it or whatever it was, but they were able to light the sawdust, and this thing would burn for hours and hours and hours, you know, and heat whatever room it was in. So
no waste.
Very, very little waste. No, people came in for the shavings, they came in for the sawdust. Any spare timber was cut up for firewood, and people, if you were lucky enough, you got some to bring home, a bag of it or whatever, you know. So yeah, it was good. Absolutely. And the thing about it was always welcome at home. A bag of be whatever it was, you know, firewood or whatever. The same as when I was in Henry's, you'd get a joint of meat every Saturday evening and you're going home, which was very well appreciated, I can tell you.
And again, Waterford was a real meat place, wasn't it? Like
it was, yeah.
And Clover and Denny's.
Yeah. Malai's done their own killing up in the Hobble over there at the other end of Leamy Street. You know, they had their own area there where they killed their.
Is this by the back of the well?
It is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was called the Hobble back then. The little street that went across as far as Leamy Street. I think it's all called Leamy Street now. I'm not sure, but they had an area there where they slaughtered their own cattle and sheep, pigs.
Was that the place where it used to be? Was it Quinlan's or took over, or someone took over a chicken place up there? Was that place?
No, that was O'Neill's poultry farm. Was up further up on up
Okay.
top of the Yellow Road. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the glass.
Right.
So you heard about the glass. What did you hear about it before you went out?
Well, I heard it was a tough enough place to work. I obviously heard about the money because that was the big attraction. The fact there was an extra few bob out there. And again, as I said, and I think you might have mentioned it yourself, Morris's was quite intense, and there were a lot of elderly men. Joe was an elderly man when I was taken on as an apprentice, and the sires were fairly old at the time. So there was more youngsters, there was more young people working in the glass factory, more people I met on the streets and met around town. So that was an attraction as well, you know.
And then, how did it work out then? You put your name down. Did you have to go out to an interview? Or?
That's right, yeah. Tom Healy was done the interviews at the time, and you were sent to see the nurse. She gave you an examination then and checked your teeth and your eyes and what have you. Made sure you were okay. And if you were some way healthy anyway, you know, you had to be some kind of a bit of health about you, a bit of a big heavy lad or a big lad or whatever it was. Not all fellas were now. But I can remember when I started in there, I was 11 stone. So I was, you know, at that age, 15 years of age, going on 16. They must have thought that I could have done the job in there. So.
And was this Johnstown?
It was Johnstown, yeah.
Okay. And so did you know what section you were going to, or how did that work?
No, I think at the time there was a vacancy, or they needed somebody in the blown room, and that's where I was directed more than anything else. You could have just as easily been directed towards the cutting shop, but I think a lot of the cutters at the time, they employed quite a number of people directly from the tech, and it would have been individuals that were pretty good at art or mechanical drawing, or you know, that end of it. If you were at that period in time apprentice from the glass factory, were being sent into the CTI to do design. I think it was what do you call Mr. Havel, Maurice Havel, the designer in the glass factory, set up some kind of classes for cutters. And from that, they kind of, you know, cutters went there and spent a number of years there, I think. Not full time, but part time, going into classes. And if they showed a bit of skill in the design, they ended up in the design department in the glass factory, you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't say not many people know about that, in the sense that there was this relationship between the CTI and glass.
Oh, that was a massive development at the time. It was unheard of, in actual fact, you know, that but whoever came up with it, and I'm assuming it was Havel that did, in connection with whoever was the CEO in the technical school at the time. But it was you know, I'd say it was very new for us. You know, it was. I don't think it was replicated in any other CTI or anything. But it was.
Very innovative, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You'd be talking about that kind of thing nowadays.
Yeah, and that was. I mean, that was in. I'm talking about when I started. It was in the 60s, 65. It was going on at that stage. You know, it was going on. In the years that I was in the tech, you would have been aware of people coming in to do that. You know, we were doing art as well, but it was just the basic art. But there was people coming in. I think they came in at night time even, you know, maybe one afternoon a week or whatever. And obviously they're not. It helped them. It helped them out. It helped out the glass factory and it helped out the CTI. Yeah. You know, so it was a good partnership.
And do you remember your first day in going into the factory in Johnstown?
Yeah, you know, I have a memory of it, all right. But because in Johnstown, in the glass, in the blown room, you had to go up a narrow stairs. You know, you walked in and you went in through a very dark corridor, and found the stairs that was going up, and you just went up the stairs, and so different. You know, from it was pitch black downstairs where you were walking up, and when you went up into the blowing room itself, it was took your breath away. I'd say. You know,
Like
it was.
what did you see?
Well, see this molten glass. What it seemed to me at the time that it was just being flung around the place. You know, but it was on the end of gathering irons and what have you, and everything was. There was people in control of it, but to walk in and look at it, it looked like it was just, you know, it was floating around the place because you weren't aware of what it was on and what use was being done with it. You know what I mean? It was certainly startling. You know,
it was really dangerous too, I suppose.
It did, and it was very, very loud as well. You know, it was loud. There was the furnaces were going, as you could well imagine, but the knocking off of iron glass, molten glass off of the end of iron, blowing irons and that, you know, you were being knocked off into bins, and it just seemed like there was a tremendous amount of noise there, you know.
But it didn't put you off though?
Oh no, it didn't put me off, no.
It was more exciting rather than...
Yeah, it was exciting. It was exciting, there's no doubt about it from the start. Did
you know any of the older fellas up on the platforms at that stage?
I knew a chap who lived in Arnagraney, a couple of doors away from where my grandmother lived, where my mother was living herself before she was married. And then he was fairly close to the top of the stairs as you went up. You turned to your right. I didn't realise it at the time, but when you got to the top of the stairs, to your left-hand side was where the crystal was being made. I was heading down towards where the soda glass was being made. And that's where I started. When I went in there, I started down on soda. Number of different jobs, bringing around water. All little jobs that had to be done, you know what I mean? It was a thirsty job there, so the people were always looking for glasses of water. So there was an actual job, a water buy at the time.
I mean,
you went around.
People probably wouldn't realise that, like, Irish Glass had a big stake in the company at that stage.
That's right, Irish Glass bought. Yeah.
So the ordinary pint glasses you got in pubs
were made there.
Were made in the glass factory.
Yeah.
So that's the soda glass.
That's the soda glass, yeah. All barware. They made lots of barware. They made the fancy items there on soda were Irish coffee glasses and stuff like that. You know, they're pretty. You know, it was skillful job, very skillful job. Soda. A lot of the lads that were on soda eventually, when soda was kind of drifted out of it, ended up on everybody that wanted to went up into the crystal end of things, you know. But that was quite a number of years after I started.
So the crystal side of it was happening at the same time as the soda?
It was a lot smaller, yeah. There was only a small number of pots, yeah. It was up and running, you know what I mean. Not as big. They were still trying to break into the market, I would imagine, you know, in relation to the crystal. That seemed to be a lot more difficult to get markets out there for the crystal. A lot of the barware the majority of that was sold in Ireland, you know what I mean? Big orders came in then at times when you were there. The Cunard line, they asked for a complete suite of the glasses would have had to have heavy bottoms on them for being on ships, you know what I mean? The usual the way ships were at the time. So the design was all that they were heavy at the base, you know.
And would they have their logo on it then?
Yeah, some of them they wouldn't have had it. It would have went to the design department or the engraving department to have. If it was needed to be engraved, if a name needed to be engraved on it, there was people that put on the Guinness name, Phoenix name, Smithwick's, you know, on the tankards and on the glasses. They were all done there. The Irish coffee glasses, there was like a shamrock on the stem of them and gold rim around the top of them, and you know, there was a lot of, you know, but stuff that you'd never see now. It's very rarely you see it around. I mean, most of the glasses in Ireland now are all imported, you know.
Well, the gas that was all handcrafted.
Yeah, all mouth blown and you know, all those soda glasses I mean, that's what I suppose eventually machines made them, and the uniformity was in the machine-made stuff, you know. But as even, you know, years later, the crystal ended up being machine-made. But even back then in the 60s, these were all blown by you know, all the Irish stuff anyway, was blown. Most of it, there was a number of glass factories in Ireland at the time, but most of them made here in Waterford, you know.
And then working as an apprentice with the blowers, what was that like?
Well, you went in, basically when you went in, you were put on 6-month probation type thing, and that's when you could have ended up as a water boy or as a feeding the layer, taking the glasses, moving the glasses from one conveyor to another conveyor and what have you, you know. And then after your 6 months, you became what they call permanent. You got a job, but there was no, at that time in the blown room, there was no training school as such, or any training facilities. You learned how to use your hands, how to keep glass straight. Knocking off, it was called at the time, but you got your hand into certain ways of moving so that you could keep an iron turning and keep the glass straight so that it wasn't going to end up bent after it came out of the mould. Your apprenticeship, a lot of it was kind of left to yourself in the sense that when you got your break, you didn't spend as much time sitting down in the canteen or sitting down. The canteen came later on, and so you didn't spend so much time having your lunch. You finished your lunch, maybe you had a half an hour. You finished your lunch in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and you got up on the platform and start trying your hand at gathering and, you know, different things like that, blowing balls, gathering, which was, at the time, it kind of depended on who you worked with as to whether they'd allow you use the glass or get up there and use the irons that they were going to have to use because when you were learning, you weren't you just didn't have the experience to gather. So usually when you were gathering and you knew what you were doing, you'd only put the iron so much into the glass. But some lads, when they were trying to learn, they could go down 6 inches or whatever, you know, into the glass. And the people that were coming back up to try and earn a few shillings after the break weren't too happy to see the irons being left like that. So you got there's a number of people in there that would help you. They knew they knew what you were going to be trying to do and what have you. They came up and they showed you what to do. You know what I mean? But there was nothing organised. That came much later on, and that became that had to be sought, if you know what I mean. People had to go in and ask for that. That wasn't, you know.
So you were dependent on the goodwill of
some of
the older men.
Yeah. A lot of them would have helped. It's like any walk of life. You got people that would help you, and you got people that couldn't be bothered helping.
And who helped you then?
I think the first blower I worked with in there was a chap called Jim O'Mara. He was blowing tumblers, like we were speaking about there a moment ago, barware, you know. Half-pint tumblers, and sometimes if the glass was good enough, they'd make pint glasses. But when you were knocking off, certain things developed in the shop, and whoever was blowing the balls, a ball blower, might have found himself behind, trying to catch up with the blower. He'd hand down an unfinished ball to you for you to try and keep straight and keep it blowed a little, put a little small bit of air in it, so that he could catch up on the blower, you know, if he was ever falling behind or whatever. So you get, you know, you just pick up little things like that. You'd be watching. I mean, you're where I'd be standing here, you'd be working on the platform as a blower, and the ball blower would be working there as if you were in a tumbler. If there's a tumbler shop you're working in, you'd be watching what they're doing. You know what I mean? So you'd be picking up little bits and pieces. And as I said, you were handed down a molten glass, a glass that had just come out of a mould. And if you weren't able to keep that straight and keep it twirling, keep it turning, you know what I mean, it would bend and be no good to anybody, you know what I mean? So you were learning from the start, but it was hit and miss at the start, you know.
And so was a lot of apprentices then let go if they didn't?
There was no test as such, you know. There was no test that came along, but you progressed. There was supervisors there, and there was people would have noticed if you had a bit of a skill, and you would have been helped. You know what I mean? Some people, I have to admit, some people went in there and they were just not interested in learning the craft or learning how to, didn't want to progress. And if you didn't show, the interests, you could be bypassed there, you could be left there, you know what I mean? Because, as I said, it was the goodwill of whoever was, you happened to be, you had no choice on who you were going to work with. You were told, go over to, you know what I mean? So it was the look of the draw, really. And people kept moving. If you became good at your job, if you were a good knocker off, if you kept glasses straight, if they weren't bringing back bent glasses and asking, what name of Jesus yet are down here, other people, other blowers would have been noticed that you were good, and as soon as somebody got moved on, another chap that would have been knocking off maybe a few shops up from you would get his chance at going up on the platform to blow balls if somebody didn't come in. And certain people could ask and maybe would get whoever showed a bit of skill, you know what I mean? So there was a pattern that was in there before I ever went in there. But you'd become aware of what was happening, and you'd see that there were certain things you needed to do, that was the way it moved on. The knocker off. It was kind of a natural progression. You went in, you started carrying around water, giving people water. Then you were put on. It's hard to describe when I finished in the glass factory. The conveyors were all very much modernised. When I started in there was just belts, asbestos belts that ran along flat surfaces, and the glasses were placed on those, and they just moved along. As soon as it came to the end if this was the end of the belt, there was a chap standing there with two forks covered in asbestos as well, taking the glasses and moving them onto the next conveyor that was going in a different direction to bringing the glasses towards the layer. And then over at the layer, there was another crowd of lads over there who were taking the glasses off the conveyors as they arrived, standing them on a little table, and somebody else took them from the table and put them into the layers, and the layer carried them through to re-anneal them, to cool them off. And if you were good at that job, you could get stuck there. You know what I mean? There were certain jobs that you moved on faster than others. If you were good at that particular job and somebody else wasn't good at it, left the glasses fall off the end of the conveyors as they passed along, he wasn't going to be asked to go on there again. So you were the fellow that was good. So eventually the fellow that was good had to be bad to get moved, if you can understand my meaning. But there was a natural progression, and as I said, some people gravitated towards certain types of glass that were being made. As I said, I initially was moved into a tumbler area, but then there was Gentili glasses, stem glasses, and tankards. Lots of different types of soda glasses being made.
And the expression Gentili.
Yes.
Is that like let's say like wine glasses?
Yes, it was small port glasses. Now, champagne glasses, as we know them, would be more like crystal glasses. You know what I mean? But these glasses were all, as I said, like barware. If somebody went in to the bar and asked for a port or a sherry or whatever, all these little glasses were there. Yeah, they were all being made on soda.
And they all had their own moulds to get the size they needed.
Yeah. And
come here, at that stage too, do you remember any of the fellas there in Johnstown being in Ballytrucker?
Oh yeah, most of the blowers would have moved from Ballytrucker in, most of the lads that were senior blowers at the time,
So for them, Johnstown must have been very posh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Johnstown they'd come on in leaps and bounds in Johnstown, you know what I mean?
And then obviously going to Kilbarry was again
massive jump again, yeah.
Because I heard Johnstown was rough, but then if you speak to certain people, they'd say Ballytrucker was rough.
Yeah, Ballytruckle was possibly, yeah, well, Ballytruckle was where it started. That's where and when they say Johnstown was rough, it was rough for lads going in there to start. But what I found with it was that you were treated, our own people, the Irish people, the Waterford people that had become blowers, tended to just act like the foreign lads had acted before them, and they carried on treating the apprentice or whatever it was similar to the way they were treated themselves. Not all of them, but some of them.
Okay, so this was a kind of thing where, the master was the boss, and
Yes.
the apprentice was like a piece of dirt,
Well, I won't say a piece of dirt. The thing, they were all on piece rate. And when they handed you a good glass, they wanted you to make sure it stayed good. You know what I mean? So if you didn't, you were in trouble. Now, what kind of trouble depended on who you were and who the individual was that you were in trouble with. But at times, I witnessed it. I witnessed certain things in there that had to change. And it kind of jumps onto the reason to get for those things to change.
Yeah. Well, we'll come to that in a second.
Yeah.
But just in relation to those, we say the Germans or the Czechs and different nationalities over there. I mean, there was still some of them on the platform, right?
Oh, they were, yeah.
Okay. And
yeah.
So, like, who would you remember from them?
I have to say now that just on what you've said there, the Germans or the Italians or the Spanish or that were there, they weren't all. They're like us, like ourselves. They weren't all nasties.
No, but
some of them were.
They came probably from a different.
Yeah, that was the way well, there were some Italians there. What I always remember, and it's possibly going back to nearly the first time, I remember Italians coming in, and for their lunch they'd have blackbirds or robins or whatever birds they were catching out the back. The evening before.
And cooking them up.
Cook them up and bring them in and they'd eat away in front of you. It was strange. They all brought in, they brought in their own food. There wasn't a canteen originally down there, and even if there was, people still brought in. You got introduced to the likes of spaghetti and stuff like that we would never have had at home, or you would have only seen in the movies, But people, and you'd get to eat the spaghetti and what have you, and cold iced tea or cold tea and everything, things that were alien to us, I suppose, But I remember I worked with a couple of the Italians there, all right. A man called Giustini. He had, I don't know whether he had an affliction, but he shook a lot, you know what I mean? I don't know whether he drank a lot or whatever it was, but you'd have a lot of difficult. You'd have to hold a mold for a man that kind of shook a bit, and you're trying to keep the glass, get the glass into the mold for him, because they would be dropping the glass down from the platform for you to close the mold, because that was one of your job. That was one of the jobs as well. You know what I mean? Quite difficult. These were small molds, little metal molds. As I said, for small glasses. You know what I mean? The Gentili, some glasses were stem. The stem was made by a stemmer, and then the foot was put on. Whereas other glasses, they pulled out a stem, and it had to fit into a mold that you were holding down it, which was quite difficult to do. You know what I mean? And again, I'll say to you that if you specialised in holding the mold, well, you could have been kept there for quite a while again. You know what I mean? If you were good, that was the situation, and you can understand why. I mean, people run piece rate, and if you were good at your job, they wanted you in that position. You know what I mean?
And we've heard that people used to be allowed to have drink down in Johnstown.
Yes, that's a fact. Yeah,
I mean, that's hard to believe nowadays.
Well, the thing about it was, I think the pub was called Canty's, just outside. As you went out the gates of Johnstown, there was a pub on your right hand side, and I think they had some kind of an arrangement. It wasn't still. I don't think it was still in place as such when I started there in '65. But you would see people with large bottles of stout under the table, the tanks that they were working off of, which it wasn't that there were anybody in the horrors or anything. It was just that for refreshment, and it wasn't that they'd be drinking all day or anything like that, but they were allowed to have possibly 2 or 3 bottles of stout.
And I presume the heat was incredible.
It was, yeah. It was. I mean, again, like you just said about Kilbarry, it was like another planet, another world altogether towards what Johnstown was. And like you said, Johnstown was that much different than Ballytruckle was,
And we'll close that door. Hang on a second, because I just hear that through.
Yeah.
But the heat and all that. It was something about the heat too. We were talking about some of the lads about. Was it the salt tablets and stuff like that?
Oh yes, yeah. They used to hand out salt tablets, and that if you wanted, they'd be available for you, salt tablets, because you'd sweat so much. Yeah.
I remember Bobby Mann saying to us that. I think it's Bobby Mann. He was a blower, wasn't he?
He was.
He said
Very good blower.
He said that they had to go up to Kilkenny to get the lads from Kilkenny because the Waterfellas wouldn't take the heat.
Yeah, I say he had a right crack about saying that. Or yeah, there was quite a number. I mean, Bobby. I think Bobby had to sign indenture papers. His family would have had to sign them. There was a number of people that. Another chap was Gene Courtney, who came up from Kerry. They had to sign indentures. Their family had to sign indentures to say that if they left before they finished their apprenticeship, the family would have had to pay the company some kind of money. I don't know what the amount of money was, but I know Bobby had to sign indentures, and Gene Courtney, who came from.
Oh, why was that? What was it? I was thinking there. What was that about?
It was the acceptable thing at the time that for you to be taken on as an apprentice and somebody to go to the bother of teaching you a craft that your family would have had to I think at one stage you probably had to pay money for someone to take you on, But it turned out to be that you signed those indentures, your parents signed them, and you were signed up for your 5 years. There were some people down there that had to finish their 5 years and never blew a glass, went to become guards or went into the army or whatever else.
And was there a big fall off of fellas? I mean, was a lot of fellas went in and stayed
there? Yeah. There was a big turn. That's what I was saying about, when you went in around that time in the 60s, they must have been taking on a lot of people because some people couldn't. Bobby was possibly right in saying that some Waterford people couldn't stand the heat. They just, it wasn't for them. It wasn't a job that they wanted to stay at, and they left. There was I say there was some turnover, in the early years in particular.
And at that time too, was Noel Griffin was there?
Noel Griffin was there. He was involved, but I think there was some. There was some. He wasn't the top man at the time. There were some Germans there, I think, and there was Winkleman in the loan room, and there was, as I said, Batchik was there. There was a lot of different.
No, because we've heard a few people saying about how the glass wasn't the same after Noel Griffin went.
Yeah, Noel Griffin came from the old school, I suppose, of the old families that ran Waterford Crystal. They had a great deal of respect for their workers, and the conditions were good. They wanted them to have good conditions. Probably couldn't deliver them immediately, but they always worked towards it. They worked towards a good pension scheme. The medical, they developed the medical facilities, which are second to none. Developed the canteens. The canteens were top class. They treated their workers pretty well. Noel Griffin and the people that were in charge up to that time, or even just after he died, there was a change, all right. But
and he died he drowned, did he?
He drowned in Dunmore, yeah.
Okay, but he wasn't well though, was he?
No, I don't think he was.
Okay.
He was unwell. Buried out in Ballygunner, I think.
Okay, and the that whole thing about like, you know, we say the McGraths or the Griffins or whatever, that they had a connection with the workers. Was that also because at that stage the company was quite small, and like it got huge eventually? Or was that you? Or was it a different kind of mindset? Do you think, like that respect thing?
Yeah, they knew. I think they knew a lot of the workers by name. You know what I mean? Like you said, it was a small operation when it moved from Ballytruckle to come into Johnstown, and then it expanded. You know, the expansion all came within Johnstown, and then a massive expansion in relation to Kilbarry, Butlerstown, Dungarvan. I mean, but Noel Griffin would have known blowers and cutters, master blowers, master cutters, on, you know, first name terms. He would have walked the floor, stopped and talked to the workers, you know. I have to say that the people that worked under Noel Griffin, likes of Tom Healy, would have done the same, and Colin O'Connell, and yeah, they would have been on first name terms with a lot of people, and that meant a lot, you know what I mean? But like I said, it did. The numbers increased, and the type of work, the whole ethos kind of changed, you know what I mean, over a period of time. But it took quite a while to change.
And how did you get involved in the union?
It was in the 60s when I started in the glass factory. 60s, 65 I said I started. So possibly about 67, 68. You used to be able to get magazines, of the pop magazines of songs, pop songs, and I think the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all these groups there was monthly magazines just come out about them. And I remember I was into music at the time, in the sense that I appreciated it, I liked it. As a musician, there was nothing there. But I did appreciate it, and it was the time of the thing. But I had a magazine with me in work one day, and I lent it to one or two people to have a look at on their breaks or whatever. You know, one of them had it in his back pocket, and he must have bent some glasses, or the day before he was after bending a couple of glasses, or he hadn't rubbed them up properly, or whatever it was. And the supervisor came back with him, which they would, and tell you what was wrong, or berate or whatever it was about your standard of work the previous day or this morning or whatever it was. But saw the book in his back pocket and took it, blaming saying that the fact that he had this book was the reason that he. So I approached him later on and asked if I could have the book back. You know, you paid for it, I bought it, right? And there was a bit of I won't say a confrontation, but a disagreement anyway. He didn't want to give it back, and I wanted it back. And when he wouldn't give it, I wanted to know. I was paying union. I mean, union. Once you were 6 months in there, you started paying your union dues. There was a collector came around, so I went to the collector and I explained the situation to him, and told me who the shop steward was. I didn't know anybody who was what or what at the time, but I asked, could it be done? Can that be? Is it right what he's after doing? And can I have it back? And there wasn't a lot that could be done, apparently. I don't think I got the book back, or I got it back maybe a week or so later, or whatever it was. But from then on, you know, as I said to you earlier, there was quite a number of people who weren't happy with the way they were being treated, and they happened to be around the same age as myself, and we spoke about it, and it was the fact that was out there happening kind of was there was prominence in the fact that somebody was there asking for a book back or whatever it was. And it's just that we approached the shop steward later on and said, there's certain things that we're not too happy with, and it went on from there. Basically, I continued to inquire into how people were being treated and different things, and I just got an interest then and there, but it was a couple of.
You were still an apprentice at this stage.
Yeah, but yeah, there was no official setup in relation to apprentice. As I said to you, there was no training for apprentice as such, unless by the goodwill of one of the masters, one of the blowers. So there was lots of little things to talk about in relation to why isn't there this or why isn't there that, or I mean, we got up and like I said, gathered at the break, and you didn't know, you just hadn't a clue about gathered, and so you ended up with blisters on your hands where the heat was out of getting at you and things like that. You know what I mean? There was lots of little improvements that could have, they wouldn't have cost a fortune. They would have went a long way. So we were continuing to ask about those and start going to union meetings then, saying that we were members and we were paying and just having our say and eventually we got an apprentice committee together, so somebody could go and represent the apprentice if there was a problem, and go to, not to the management, you couldn't go to the management, but you could go to your shop steward, or you could go to the committee, a committee member or whatever it was, and bring your grievance, and they would deal with it as best they could, So,
and who were the union people of those days? I mean, way back now when you were first.
Well, the first contact I would have had with anyone on the union as such was the collectors, because your money wasn't stopped out of your wages at the time. Someone used to go around and collect the union dues every week. So, I mean, at that stage, I think there was a chap called John Donnelly. He ended up having a pub down on the quay. John Donnelly, he was there were blowers that done it. It wasn't apprentice or anything, it was blowers. I remember people that were collecting, Mossy Kelly used to collect at some stage, Tommy Allen. The shop stewards, one of the first shop stewards I became aware of was Eddie Savage. And Eddie was on Soda, where I was. So it's quite possible that it was Eddie I went to about the book, I'm not too sure at the time. But he was the shop steward, and he had a committee. So you could have went to some of the committee members or the shop steward. It was fairly basic setup. It was, when I say basic setup, it was what you would have expected to see in any other factory at the time.
Well, getting an apprentice representation was a big step, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. You see, there was also cutters, young cutters who felt quite similar to how we felt, and we all happened to be interested in the same music, or we all happened to be, we were starting to become aware of the world, the problems in the world, what was happening. Cuba was a big thing at the time. And we used to meet and chat and have a couple of pints and talk about, how they were getting on in the cutting shop, how we were getting on in the blowing room, and things slowly developed, from there.
So your generation was very instrumental for a lot of changes in the glass, wasn't it?
Eventually, yeah. Well, I was, at the time, talking about Decky Chasty or Shammy Power, or even Tom Hogan, maybe Jimmy Kelly, in the cutting end of things, who we were speaking to. Again, there was organisations out there that some people had joined, the Connolly Youth Movement and different things, different Sinn Féin were there, and a lot of people joined them. But people became aware of agitation that was going on around the world, going on in factories, going on in how people were being treated. The thing, it was just kicking off in the north of Ireland in the late 60s, you know what I mean? And they were going through the American experience. Vietnam was coming on stream. There was just so many, it was just
The time.
an awakening of people at the time, you know what I mean? And people started to look to themselves and look to the conditions that they were working under and set about trying to change them,
And within all that gang of young people, we call you, who was the major influences for you, at that time?
Well, the lads I've named out, and then Dermot Power in the lads were in the wedge cut, and Dermot was in the Rhine tour. There was a younger group of people started talking to one another and comparing how people were being dealt with and how they were being treated, and we're moving in the same direction. You know what I mean? I don't think there was any one individual that stood up on a box and said to us all, come on, this is the way to go, or anything. We were still isolated in our sections in relation to bringing about change, you know what I mean? And it wasn't always the management only that you had to bring people along with you. You had to bring along the workers that you were claiming to represent or wanting to represent, or asking for a bit of fairness or whatever it was, you know what I mean? But
because Ireland is a very conservative society, isn't it?
Oh yes, yeah.
I mean, we're very, between the church and whatnot, it's a very conservative.
Certainly is, and it certainly was more so then. There was a lot of taboos around at that stage. But no, it's in fairness, the people that were representing the workers were very very open and encouraged. They encouraged the younger lads to get involved, and they did. Declan became the shop steward down in the cutting shop. I became the shop steward in Johnstown. We both moved. We moved out to Kilbarry as shop stewards as such. You know what I mean? And in Johnstown, we to make the way it progressed is we were accepted as apprentice and having a view and having, all we were asking is that your apprenticeship would be made more direct, and it would be more open. You would know where you were going or how you were progressing or what have you. And it resulted in the setting up of training schools in Johnstown, and in Johnstown, in the Blown and in the cutting shop, where you'd be brought in for a period of time to the training school, where there was ex-craftspeople who had been through the mill in there to teach you how to blow, how to start. And the way the training schools came about was it didn't only train the apprentice. There was qualified blowers in there being trained as well, how to blow to a particular standard. And it was coming about at the same time that it was the demise of soda and the growth of crystal. So the training was basically on crystal, and you were coming from the soda end of things. That's where a lot of the lads went from there. Now I had moved to onto the crystal end of things before that. I had there was shift work in the factory at the time in Johnstown, and I got promoted to late shift, to shift work, which, as you can imagine, for 15, 16, 17-year-olds was it wasn't attractive, to say the least, because you had to go in at 4 in the evening and you were there until 12 at night. And
so no pubs.
Oh, there was nothing. You worked, and if the glass was bad or the glass was gone, you still had to stay there until 12 o'clock in the night to clock out. And you can well imagine that there was damage done, or there was nuisance. People made nuisance of themselves in the staying there, because everybody else were gone. The people that were working, the blowers would have been gone. So the apprentice or the rest of the shop was left there, and we were all only youngsters. So you played in there as much as you would have played outside the place, and there was, as I said, little bits of damage done every now and again, and people began to think, look, is it really worth keeping these fellas in here until 12 o'clock? So they started, it kind of got better in the sense that when the glass was finished, you were allowed home. You were allowed to get it, well, you got out, so you weren't causing any more damage. And when I say damage, it wasn't any malicious damage. It's just silly little things. People were touching things that they shouldn't touch and things like that. But eventually, that was a success in itself, to say that you were able to go home at 9:30 or 10 o'clock or whatever it was, once the glass was done, and you were either making as many as you could make, many glasses as you could make. But that kind of carried on then into Kilbarry. There was late shift from the start in Kilbarry. There was people went in there at 4 when the majority of people finished at 4 o'clock. There was people that went in to finish the pots in the evenings. But a similar situation occurred then. You know that the glass was only good up to such a time. The blower would finish. The ball blower would become the blower because he was able to blow smaller pieces that you could get away with using in with the bad glass. And the blower was gone, be it to the pub or home or wherever he went. You could only work on it at a certain time. Again, you had to stay there for until 12, and it was a repetition of what happened previous. People were just running around. I mean, there was youngsters there. I mean, there was the ball blower who would have been in charge would have been 19, 20, maybe 21 at the most. And there were youngsters there, about 15, 16, that would have only come in. And you weren't a teacher, you weren't a manager, you weren't, you know what I mean. So you couldn't look out, you couldn't ensure that they didn't do any damage. They tried everything. They tried the furnace men used to be in charge of the furnaces, preparing the glass for the following morning. They tried to give them the responsibility of making sure there was no damage done and everything else. You know what I mean? But fellas just took it as a challenge, and they ran around and made men follow him. And, you know, it was mad. But eventually, it finished. Shift work finished, and what they actually done at that stage then was they done overtime. People stayed back and worked overtime until the glass was, and then everybody went home. Yeah. And you know, yeah, that's just that.
It sounds to me like a lot of the changes that you got in through the union were practical and were necessary.
Yeah, the thing about it, the union in Kilbarry was so much different than the union the structures changed. When people got involved in the unions, what had started as blowers and cutters, apprentice blowers and cutters getting together and everything, developed into a sense that you start talking to. We went to Dublin every second weekend, or we went to Cork the other weekend, out of Waterford for different things, and you met people and you spoke to people, and you found that there was people all over the country that were of similar mind to yourself, that conditions should be better and what have you. And one of the best things we ever done was got the union rule book, because a lot of the rules in the union were for meetings and structures and committees and what have you. And we set about kind of, organising that when we became particular shop stewards. Not that there was always structures there, don't get me wrong, and they were good. They helped us out, but the union turned out into a situation whereby, say, the blowers had a senior shop steward, who was the overall shop steward in the blowing room. Then, we were still in Johnstown, there was a shop steward for Johnstown. We had moved to Kilbarry in K1. There was a K1 blowing room. They had a shop steward. K2 had a shop steward. Each of those shop stewards had a committee to help him do his job in that particular, which there was opposition to, as you can well imagine. But this was all being done. Most of this was all being done outside of work. The union hall was at a coming on stream down in Kaiser Street. Before that, there was just a small office down on the quay, 117 the quay, where we used to go down to meetings. But it became a bit of a way of life with a number of people, in the sense that there was meetings every week, and every second there was an open meeting. The committee would go down and meet one week. There'd be an open meeting the following week. The committee would meet the following week to see what can be done with decisions that had been made at the open meeting the previous week. And it developed into a very, very structured organisation. More structured than possibly any other workplace in the country, and would rival a lot of the bigger unionised industries in Britain at the time. It developed into a situation whereby there was conveners appointed. You know, the company agreed to setting up, having actually conveners. There was always a house committee. That is to say that the likes of Noel Griffin, who you mentioned earlier, and his management team would meet the union on a monthly basis. And an agenda would have been drawn up possibly 2 weeks before the meeting would take place, and both sides would have submitted items for the agenda. We'd both be aware of what was being submitted by the other side, and we'd try and get the answers to whatever problems they had, and we would expect that they would do the same from their side, you know. And it worked very well for a long, long time, you know, a long, long time.
I mean, so Walter, you're saying that basically that through yourselves as a group and what you were picking up from the wider world and society and all that, but also through the union, you were educating yourselves.
Yes, there was first of all, in the cutting and the blown, it was a piece rate system, and any time there was new glasses came out, they had to be priced, and that would take a meeting. Something would be put on trial, and somebody would make it, and they'd see how many they could make and how hard it was to make, what have you. That was kind of left down to the shop steward and the committee, and maybe one or two ex-craft people who were now were then on management. But we then set up piece rate committees of people who would set the piece rates. Workers' representatives on setting the piece rates with management representatives. Now, the management could choose who they wanted to represent them, and the workers it would be the union with the help of some senior craftsmen. So the craftsmen would be co-opted onto a piece rate committee. Some of the top craftsmen that were there, and they would, and whatever the company wanted made, they'd be made by these people who were being watched by ex-craftspeople and what have you. So, as well, hand in hand with the likes of the piece rate committee and the apprenticeship committee, the apprentice committee became the training school committee, because they were in charge of arranging the training for the apprentice and the craftsmen. We also had an education committee, which was very important, that was set up. And as I said, as I went into it there, which the union had facilities. Cirencester in England, they had a college which was open to 18 GW, and a lot of the shop stewards. Now, even going back as far as, I'm not sure if Eddie Savage went, but Sean Cuddihy definitely went to Cirencester. He would have been a shop steward before I was ever a shop steward in the Bloner. There was quite a number of people previous to say myself and Declan that were there before us that would have went to these places, but it was being opened up to people that were on their holidays. You could go. The factory closed down for 2 weeks at the time. Your 2 weeks holidays could be in Cirencester at college. You know what I mean? Or it could be, at the time, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions had an education department with tutors. And they would be invited down to Waterford for the weekend, or we would negotiate with the company that there was an education course going on and that some of the stewards had to get to it. You know, and we eventually got to that kind of things were done that way. People that went to on courses, people that went to Cirencester, gathered their books and all the papers that they could get over there. And when they came back, they would have held a weekend seminar in the union office. The same with anyone that had been to an Irish Congress of Trade Unions seminar would have passed on the information that they got to anyone that was interested to go there. But you'd be giving up your evenings or your weekends, and that was how it started. But people became educated in relation to the company introduced work study, time and motion, job evaluation. When that was all being introduced, the union got people to go on the courses, courses on the same subjects, and organised that. The likes of Tom Wall, who else was there? Oliver O'Donoghue, Peter Cassells, all in the Irish Congress of Trade Unions at the time. That they'd come down for a weekend and run courses for us. You know what I mean? So, you know, there was a lot of change. A lot of changes came about, and a lot of them came about around the one time. You know, every section down there, every section in the company. It was very fragmented at one stage, but I mean, when the branch structure was set up, the branch committee had a representative from every section in the company, and they would, you know, it was a duplication of what would have happened in the Blown Room. They would have went to their meetings, and problems would have been raised, or aspirations would have been raised of what they wanted to get in their particular sections. And they would bring it to the branch. And the branch would then bring it on to the company at these house meetings that they were called. You know, so there was quite a number of things would appear on the agenda for those meetings. But we ended up with quite an educated, I'd call it workforce, but definitely a union, on the union end of things, you know what I mean? And as I said to you earlier on, a lot of those people that became educated were recognised by management for having certain skills, and they were recruited onto management after going through the union education. You know what I mean?
So you were the training ground.
Yes, yeah, very much so. There were seminars on. People went. It's unbelievable where people went. You know what I mean? And the contacts that were made. In political parties and other parties that were around the place at the time, that helped, you know, later on when disputes kind of rose their head later on, you know.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned to you before we started filming that, you know, the Glass would have had a kind of a radical reputation, you know what I mean? But not within the company, in the sense that you didn't have any strikes, did you?
No, and very, very few. Yeah. Very, very few.
And yes, you had this reputation because you were involved in lots of other campaigns in Waterford or internationally. And
yeah, yeah. There was the support was there. You know what I mean? The any time that a request came in from anybody that was found themselves in trouble, they always got and when you talk about the militant reputation. What went hand in hand with that would have been the charitable reputation that seems to be always get forgotten about. There was charities helped out and institutions helped out in the town that, you know, were never came to the surface. You know what I mean? And in relation to, say, what people call militant, miners' children were brought over, or dockers' children were brought over here on holidays and what have you, to Woodstown and different places. That some people might call it militant, but it's comradeship, you know what I mean? It's solidarity, it's unity, it's Waterford Glass. There were very few people, very few sections, very few shop stewards ever called in and said, listen, I want to give you your eyes, would you go back and tell the lads about what the conditions and the benefits that were down there were hard won, you know, hard won by the union. And when I say the union, I'm talking about everybody. Everybody down there was a member of the union. So it's not. I'm not talking about shop stewards or a committee or anything like that. The structure was there, that decisions were taken at open meetings where everybody was invited to attend, and it dealt with annual pay rises, and it dealt with your holiday entitlements, and you know, and your pension benefits and everything like that. The benefit age was dropped to 55 at one stage, 53 for craftsmen. You know what I mean? it all clawed back eventually. But you know, those things were achieved. I mean, when I went in there first, and I'm sure a lot of other people before. It's not just when I went in there first, but married women had to leave after 6 months working. You know, if you got married, you had 6 months to work, and you were out. There was a battle had to be fought to the retention of married women. It was called to achieve that. Equal pay. There was battle for equal pay then that had to be fought and won, and supported by the craft sections for equal pay. You know, in areas that were for females with general workers, with male workers, females with male workers, and the battles that were done with that. You know what I mean? There was none of these things just given to people, and the wages and the bonuses and the extra holidays and everything like that. That was all fought for. You know, it was, and the thing about it is, even if you didn't go to your union meeting, you reap the benefits of it. You know, and
I'm sorry for rushing you, Walter, but just, I know Keith has to go somewhere shortly, but
no
just
bother.
in relation to the demise, I mean, I know you were there for the strike in 1990, was it?
Yeah.
90? Well, I mean, where did you see that the whole relationship between the union and the management, where did you see it all going wrong?
I don't think it went wrong as such, in a sense, between the union and the management. Like you mentioned yourself, Ollie, you kind of referred to Noel Griffin and his style of management. There was the factory was sold by the people you spoke about earlier, the Fitzpatricks, the Griffins, you know, all of those people. The Irish Pensions Trust, the hospital sweepstake, the McGraths, they owned it all. They decided to sell it, and it was sold to a number of different people over the years. And all of those people just wanted to make as much out of the glass factory as they could, out of much profit as they could. The style of management changed. They brought in hatchet men who had been successful in the likes of Guinness's, who had been successful in Fords of Cork. Success is in brackets there, as they claimed it to be a success, and the people that brought him in on contract to carry out a hatchet job thought they were successful. But there was a gradual undermining of the union structure, and there was it started way back before people realised that it was coming. But it was also the unravelling then of all the conditions and the benefits that had been accrued over the years. The strike itself was manufactured, it was stage managed, in my opinion. It was they claimed it was over the bonanza payment. The bonanza payment was in the cutting shop. It was I don't agree with it being called a bonanza payment, but that was, you know, at the time it was, these words were introduced. They didn't seem to be as detrimental as they turned out to be. This type of payment that it was about, in my opinion, was something that had developed over a number of years with the blessing of management and the union. It was a negotiated situation, but the management that had come into the situation wanted it back. And it was to get out the stories that they got out about it, and to make it look the way they did. They'd done their job well, and that's where these people were successful, in the sense that the propaganda and the things, they got their story across, and the media loved it and ran with it. But the bonanza payment was only the tip of I'm still calling it the bonanza payment, but it was only the tip of the iceberg. You know, there was loads of other things that were coming down the road behind it. Yeah.
And looking at that now in retrospect, because this is a long time ago, I mean, do you see then that, in a sense, the writing was on the wall from that point on, like, in the sense of when the company was sold to these people that were...
The writing, in my opinion, the writing was on the wall as soon as they said they wanted to press glass. They wanted to damage the craft. They wanted to maximise their profits. They wanted to continue, and they have done, and they've done it. They're doing it up to today, selling pressed glass as water for crystal here in the town. It's no matter where you go, it's not been bought. If people are told that this is pressed glass that we're selling you here at Waterford handcraft prices or more, it wouldn't be bought, and it won't be bought for. I don't think it's going to be bought for a whole lot longer, because the word is out. It's out there. No. You take an auctioneer. Auctioneers won't buy pressed glass. Auctioneers will buy and sell on glass that was made by hand, mouth blown, hand cut, crystal. There is a big downturn in the States. They can't sell. What we predicted would happen is actually happening. Okay. You know what I mean? They milked the profits, and that's what they were about. That's why the strike came about. That's what they tried to do. They wanted to break the union.
And so, therefore, if they had stayed as a handcrafted industry, do you think there was a future?
Certainly was, yeah.
And on that subject, do you think that people appreciated the fact that it was here in Waterford? Did you think that we appreciated that it was a handcrafted industry, or did you think that we saw it as a factory?
Well, if you go, no matter what house you go into in Waterford, you're going to see hand-cut, mouth-blown Waterford crystal still in it. I don't think you'll see many. You'll see there's a couple of pressed items you might see in it. Waterford glass was sold as handcrafted glass, and that no two pieces were the same, because it was made by a craftsman, and he was using raw molten glass that anything could happen to while he was in the process of. It was his skill that made the uniformity there. They came up with the idea that machines could do that. They wanted to sell it in Japan, and Japan wanted everything uniform, and that was the big selling point at the time. Japan was the mind America. Japan is where nobody did. The story went out there that young couples in America don't want handcrafted glass anymore. That's what their parents used to want. You know, that end of things is dead. That it had to be machine made to be accepted out there in the world. But I think that was their biggest mistake. It was handcrafted glass. It was being handcrafted since the 1700s or earlier even. And it's the glass that was made way back then, back in the 1700s, is more valuable than what's been pressed around the world now at this stage. It's globalisation, and it's flooding the market with commodities I mean, I can remember you talked about Noel Griffin. They would have said to you, you'll never see it being sold down in Shaw's or down in Primark or in all these places that it ended up being sold in America, you know what I mean, in Walmart and all of these places. It was only going to be in the top class places. The new people that came in wanted it just sold. They didn't care where it was sold. They wanted the money off it, and they flogged it dead. They flogged it to death, in my opinion. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, right? So sorry about this, but just in.
I could talk to you for hours, and yeah.
It's really interesting. You know what I mean? All the. I know. We have to go. Walt, is there anything else you want to say before we finish? Because I know I'm sorry for rushing at the end here now, but just.
Well, I was sad to see the strike, because I believe that was the really brought on what was inevitable eventually, I suppose, once the people that are running the company wanted to do. What I would like to say is that a book has come out quite recently by Martin Hearn, and I would suggest that everybody that ever worked in Waterford Crystal get the book and read it. I'm not pushing for them to go out and buy the book. I have 2 copies of it myself. I'll gladly loan it out to anyone to read it, because I think Martin captures in that book, and in facts and figures and credible facts and figures, what really happened at the end. I was gone from the company in '92, and there were struggles going on at that particular point in time. But the point that I made earlier about the bleeding of the craft, I believe, is proven in Martin's book. And he stands over every fact that he has in it. It's all there, the whole lot of it, right up to the very end, when people were being put out on the street, when the pension fund was being told it was depleted. There were still people taking millions and millions out of that industry.
And I thought it was very interesting too. I mean, I haven't read it all yet, but just even the skullduggery back in the 50s when Havel was done out of, when some of the early people who started off the factory were done out of their share of the company by other interests.
Yes, yeah.
So that was really interesting too to read.
Very, very interesting. It's the book that Martin has written is fantastic, but there's room for other books to be written there. That's all I'm saying. And the thing I would like to say about it, I worked there from 65 to 92, and I never met a better group of people to work with. I went down there with a smile on my face. Some people say, oh yeah, you were a convener in the union, you didn't have to go into work. But I did work. I worked from 65 and I worked, and a lot of people out there know that I did work, and I blew glass whenever I had to blow it or whenever I needed to blow it or whatever. But it was some fantastic place. The people that you met out there, I know, as I said earlier on, there were some, like all walks of life, you get good and bad and everything. But there was always more good out there than there was bad. And I didn't say it, but you could write another book on the work that was done for charitable organisations in this town, be it from the RSC, the sports centre down there, to the cat labs out in Ardkeen before the problems that were out there. They contributed to everything.
And Walter, I think you should also just mention quickly, is just about the fight for the pension.
Well, the fight for the pension that the union took on will go down the annals of working class history. There's no doubt about it. They were forced to go to Europe. But there was another group of people that I was involved with. There was 300 people, and there was then another 300 people before it who were represented by John Lucas, who for 10 years, both groups of people would have went through the Supreme Court, the High Court, had bailiffs banging on our door, telling us that we were going to be thrown out on the road and everything was going to be taken out of your house. And at the end of the day, all I'd say is that the union were very successful in representing the workers that were still in the company at the end of the day. And both John Joe Lucas and his group of workers and myself and the group of workers that I represented all got settlements from the Irish Pensions Trust. Waterford Crystal were gone when the group that I represent got a settlement. The lads that with John Joe Lucas got a settlement between the company and Irish Pensions Trust, but it's fairly well documented what the lads in the union, Unite the Union, had to do in Europe. But the other two groups of people, and there's still a lot more people out there who never got fixed up for the pensions, had to go 10 years each through the High and Supreme Courts to get a settlement. But it needs to be said that they did get a settlement. They had to settle for a reduced pension, a reduced settlement because of the reduced pension that was out there. But fair play to them, they fought, and I don't think it's over yet. You know what I mean? Watch this space.
That's some battle, like.
It's a battle that people couldn't live with. Some people were forced to leave it. Some people with better cases than I had left because they couldn't afford, because their homes are going to be taken off them. They were threatened with having their homes taken off them. They were threatened with the sheriff, the local sheriff, the corporation sheriff, doing his job now. He's the sheriff, and that's what he is. But that the legal system could call on him to go to your home and take out goods to the value of whatever the bills was they were after getting, after being awarded in the High Court or the Supreme Court, and people just gave up on their pension. It's a shame to say it, but there are people in this town who are entitled to pensions who will never get them. You know.
Okay, well, Walty, sorry for rushing you, and thanks very much for giving us your time. Really, really appreciate it.
No bother at all, Annie. Thank you, and thank you.